So Donald Trump is off on his second Euro trip, dealing with our allies in NATO, or at least our current allies in NATO, visiting the UK, where there's expected to be large protests, and he will eventually be meeting in a one-on-one summit with Vladimir Putin. Now, it is too early to know exactly what policy or real-world consequences of these meetings that we'll actually have. There have been developments today, but honestly, I find every single one of his quotes or the reactions to it insufferable, and I don't want to hurt my own sanity or yours, so we're not going to cover it in detail. But we can predict what effect more international exposure to Donald Trump might have on the views of America and Americans in other countries, because the information up until this point has not been positive. If we bring up this first picture, you're going to see confidence in the US president and views of the US from the time Trump got into office and now, and both of those are moving in the wrong direction if you want America or Americans to be accepted abroad. But that's the numbers. So I want to get a specific case study. So we have a verified European. You lived in Belgium until the teens, right?
Yeah, I moved to the United States when I was 18 for university.
Okay, so you had a good upbringing, and I mean generally, I mean obviously opinions vary, but what were the perceptions of America and Americans at that point?
Really interesting. During George W. Not so favorable. I do recall though, because everyone in our neighborhood knew that we were like the American family. And growing up, I always felt very American. And then when I came to the United States, after like not really spending time here apart for like a few weeks every summer, being like, oh, okay, cool, no. After 9/11, a lot of our neighbors did come and they were like, they expressed a lot of sympathy, but there's a definite marker, and it's probably just because of my age, of like pre and post 9/11 with how Americans were perceived. There was an outpouring of sympathy and compassion from our immediate neighborhood in Waterloo, Belgium, in the wake of 9/11. When George W. started when he really started beginning this like America first sort of shift, it was not very favorable. Especially you'd hear like on like the satire programs, you'd hear like his Texas accent was very mocked. He was very like, he felt very like this American caricature of someone that doesn't seek to understand. And he said a lot of disparaging remarks about Europe in general. Like he was not a huge fan. So I think that started with like George W. When Obama was elected, I remember staying up for that to watch it because of the time difference. And it felt like really a lot more positive because he'd always talked about diplomacy. And remember, he went on that European tour even before he was elected. So that you saw a shift towards being a little bit more favorable. It's basically what I would say is, if a president from the United States expresses an interest in diplomacy and at least understanding what is going on with a global mentality, then it feels like Europe, well, I can only speak for Belgium, like we're far more like understanding, like okay, he's engaging with us. America First is incredibly obviously isolationist, and it doesn't play well to foreign audiences because it just comes across as when Americans tour countries as well, we would have this expression, my mom would say, don't be an obnoxious American, which is basically, you hear in the US where people will be like, you know, when you're in America, speak the language, like you gotta speak English. And then when they go to foreign countries, they'll expect them to speak English too. Like, why don't you speak English? So it's this like ignorance and this sort of like obnoxious thing that you see when you have this American first mentality. When you have a president that leads the way by saying, let's all understand each other from where you're coming from, then we get further.
Yeah, that is perhaps the most arrogant thing imaginable, to go to another country and say, why don't you speak my language?
It happens, and who speaks English? Like, bitch, you're in our country now, learn French, mother blanker. Sorry, I didn't say that.
Yeah, all of that is wrong to expect internationally or to say here. So I want to go to some other interesting information because we have the wide scale, the overall views of America changing. But what about in particular countries? So there you're seeing a breakdown. The blue number is the percentage in that population who have confidence in the US president to do the right thing in the world. Orange is Trump. So you see, first of all, Sweden, gigantic difference of 83 points between them. And what you'll notice is that the gap varies and the absolute values vary. But all the way down to Jordan, Obama has more confidence. Only in 2 cases is that different. Israel, where the population is largely split. I mean, that's almost like a US election in the split. And Russia, where 53% believe Trump will do the right thing for the world, and only 11% felt that of Obama. That is one of the most fascinating infographics that I have seen since Trump was elected. I mean, I think we could come up with some explanations as to why that is, but that is simply fascinating that those two cases, and really only one case, strongly fights against that trend. I would love to know why Nigeria is so positive in Vietnam, so positive towards Donald Trump, but they are big fans of him. I'm not entirely sure why. We'll have to look into that. But thank you for lending your experience. I have traveled in Europe, but did not grow up there, and so I only have an anecdotal experience of my own. Okay, thank you for joining us, by the way.
Thank you for having me.
Always great to have you here.